Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. All right, Andy, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I really appreciate you being able to come on from Timber Age Builders and share kind of your, in some ways, new kind of a business model around cross-laminated timber. So yeah, without further ado, let's go to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Becca, and thank you guys so much for the invite. It's a pretty incredible group of people that you have all brought together. My name's Andy Hawk. I'm half of Timber Age. My partner, Kyle Hansen, may or may not jump on. He was out retrieving a tool. We're really pleased and honored to be able to present to you all. So we'll just jump here. Becca, can you see my slides? Okay, I got some head nods there. All right. So just quickly, who we are, kind of our history with the Wood Innovation Program, what we've done really around scaling down CLT to really fit ponderosa pine and as Tim mentioned, to fit rural communities. We want to see the benefits of mass timber throughout the rural West, rural Rockies, and be involved in kind of overall wood utilization. Covered where we think we can go over the next like to do to help scale up our production, and a little bit on how much we think we can consume. And as Tim also mentioned, approaching local building communities, code officials, things of that nature is going to be an important part of getting adoption around CLT and other mass timber. So just quickly, our idea kind of hatched in about 2016 when my partner Kyle heard an original article on NPR, and that really pushed us forward. We started talking with Tim and Melissa and a number of others. By 2018, we applied for the Wood Innovation Program, or Wood Innovation Grant Program, and were successful and got a Wood Innovation Grant in May of 18. It was a $243,000 grant to specifically look at the use of ponderosa pine in CLT, and then put together the first locally utilized CLT panels in Southwest Colorado, and then do a lot of public outreach and education, lots of interviews with architects, engineers, contractors, trying to get a sense for what a market in rural Colorado might look like. So that kicked us off. 2019 was a very big year, lots of activity in kind of 2019 through the Wood Innovation Program. And then 2020 has really been all about standing the business up on its own. We're participating in a couple of business incubator programs throughout Colorado and have really started to move things forward. We have a very small manufacturing facility south of Durango, kind of halfway between Durango and Ignacio for those that know the area. And we're a very small company. It's just Kyle and I at the moment, and we're really hoping to bring on a couple of additional folks by the end of 2020 and a couple more in 2021. And right now we're sourcing wood both from some of our local mills. Tim and Melissa and Becca will be familiar with this, but are a couple mills in the area that do have both some green ponderosa clear and some bug-killed ponderosa available. One of the things we've encountered that is really interesting is that for us to make CLT at the scale that we are, we need 5-quarter boards. And 4 of the local mills in our area that we have talked to, none of them are at the moment willing to or tooled to cut 5-quarter. They're all cutting 4-quarter boards, primarily for siding or T&G. So that led us to the purchase of a very old Wood-Mizer mill that you can see there on the bottom right. It's a 1987 LT40 that we got out of Maine. Believe it or not, it came out of an old pallet mill. We have refurbished it, and it saws boards. And please to jump in and interrupt me as you guys all have questions. I prefer to do these things as interactive as possible. We're also working on private land. it has been, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but it is fascinating. Every time someone sees the mill or they see us sawing, they offer us trees. They're like, here's 40 more trees. Can we give you 80 trees? Can we give you 60 more trees? I've got 30 acres of land that we'd love to see you thin, these kinds of things. And so there's clearly an appetite for utilization of the wood, and we're just sort of dialing in really how to go about that. In the picture on the left there, you can see a number of cants where what we have determined is that a lot of the local mills can quickly produce some very nice cants, and we can take those back and resaw and turn them into 5/4.
Hey, Andy, can you just, for me, I don't know what the difference between 5/4 and 4/4 is.
Oh, absolutely.
Savvy.
Yeah. So 4/4 in an inch,
Okay.
5/4 in an inch and a quarter. So to meet some of the standards for the production of CLT, which I'll touch on here in a minute, we're starting with an inch and a quarter thick board, Becca, and then planing down from there to get, a very uniform surface. You'll see some pictures of that, and wood surface with the pores open so that it can accept the glue.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
You're welcome. So we got Ponderosa Pine Super Pros on the phone, so they're not going to be shocked here. Ponderosa Pine is fascinating to dry and to work with. And I think I have stumbled across some of your work from the White Mountains. And a lot of amazing stuff came out of the White Mountains with the drying of Ponderosa. And we're drying both as cants and as boards as experiments. We're air drying, and on the right there, you can see our first solar kiln. It's got doors on it now, and it's got all kinds of very cool automation in it. My partner, Kyle, is incredible with automation and programmable logic controllers. So that kiln actually weighs the wet wood and dries automation to turn the fans off and on to help us dry optimally. But getting the pine down to between 9 and 15% moisture content for the CLT construction standard is really critical. And Ponderosa loves to move. I mean, it'll tie itself in knots if we don't dry it carefully. So after kind of the 2019 period and talking to a lot of local builders, knowing that CLT at the European, Canadian, Pacific Northwest scale, 8, 10, 12 foot tall panels, 20 feet long, huge pieces of equipment, $1 million facilities was not what the market in sort of smaller rural Colorado would bear. And so we started shrinking our form factor and settled on a panel that is 5 feet by 10 feet by 3 inches thick and is created in a vacuum press. And what you can see here is a couple of the very first prototypes that we put together. On the left is a panel in the vacuum bag. That vacuum's applying about 1,400 pounds per square foot. And then, studying what had been done in Europe, Canada, and the Northwest, understanding that edge pressure is as important as face pressure. We've started to develop some different clamp systems. The first clamp was Kyle on the right there. He's like, wait, how do these all fit together? And how do we deal with this pine that likes to involve a lot of bow and a lot of crook? But it was really quite fun to speak with local builders. And by the time we got to something that they recognized, the shape and a size that they recognized, it's when their minds really started to move and say, oh, I think I know how we could go about using this. So we're just evolving the process. On the upper right there, you can see the amount of bow and the amount of crook in some of those boards. And this was absolutely an experiment. All bug killed pine there. We're also playing around with, how long can a tree be standing dead or even on the ground bug killed before it fails the specific density that is required for CLT. But we took some really nasty boards and actually didn't even edge these. We just planed them and didn't edge them, and then threw them in the press. On the left there, you can see kind of a next version of a clamp prototype. We're actually on to kind of version 4 of some different clamping mechanisms. But we wanted to see, can we actually clamp this stuff? And sure enough, between some good edge pressure and being in the vacuum, we dialed it right in. Our glue lines are starting to meet the PRG 320 standards. And even with boards that are probably not acceptable by that standard, given that they have to be 2 or better on the outside and 3 or better on the inside, we wanted to just do an experiment with what can we do with the technology that we have, and you can see the results of it here. So we got very close to a dead-on 3-inch thick panel, and we're able to close a lot of the edge gaps and ended up with some very good glue lines. Timber Age as a company is not currently certified under APA. We're going to pursue APA certification for our panels. So at the moment, our panels are not certified in the structural component. So you'll see some pictures of some projects that we've got underway where we're utilizing post and beam, because these are not APA PRG 320 certified panels. So just a couple of examples here. This was some of our public outreach. We quickly figured out that in rural communities that may not have seen a mass timber building before, or just hadn't come into contact with it, we needed to put people's hands on it. Tim and Melissa helped us with an outreach back in the fall of 2019. You can see kind of a demo of walls and floor coming together there. One of those walls is now my stand-up desk at home, and I love it. And the floor there, you can see we cut the floor and the other wall up and made that bench. Kyle and I intend to make a couple more benches and put them out in Durango just as educational pieces, just to get people's hands on it. We're finding that as people put their hands on CLT, they want to know more about it. Like, what is this and what do you do with it? And why is it so interesting? So this is the wall system kind of carrying forward a little bit. We're kind of developing a CLT based SIP, for lack of a better term, where the CLT will be the interior wall. So the interior of the structure will be CLT. And then we've actually designed a wall system now that we're prototyping, where we're using tight pack cellulose and stabilized cellulose as the insulative layer outside of that, and TGIs as basically to just create the void for the insulation, and then the air and vapor barriers, and then strapped and ready for exterior siding. This too was a push that we got from part of our local building community. They were really interested in the CLT, and then they said, can you actually deliver us a fully insulated wall system that we could just bolt together on the job site? And so Melissa and Tim, we actually bought an insulation machine now, and we can blow our own insulation, and we've been practicing with this as well. So this is actually our first project that's coming out of the ground. It's with La Plata County for permitting at the moment. It's a 16 by 24 foot. Beams will be solid ponderosa pine, and the walls, rear wall, CLT, and the wall that would be kind of to your right is actually sliding louvered CLT panels that will be on a track. The family wanted the ability to push the panels together kind of conference room style, or pivot them depending on what the sun and the wind was doing. So we've been working with our architect to put together this structure. And as soon as we get the building permit from La Plata County, we are actually ready to go. So this will be our first project. It's just fascinating. The more I come forth, out of the blue, we got asked to figure out, could we make a hogan, a traditional Navajo hogan, out of CLT walls and CLT roof panels, and could that be put together rapidly on site with local labor and workforce. And so we're working on a project around a Navajo hogan. My partner Kyle is in the process of designing a multi-generational home on some acreage outside of Durango, and we've been approached on kind of a neat idea. The folks in Flagstaff will probably appreciate this, but sort of VRBO for horse people, where there's a little home made out of CLT for the humans, and it's on a plot where there are corrals, and folks that are moving horses across the country could have a place to stay. So we're actually in the midst of various design stages for all of these structures, and we'll enter the permitting process on a couple of them here shortly. I wanted to touch on just wood utilization and scaling, and what do we think we can consume. We've been utilizing a drone that we bought to help us both look at potential building sites and look at the forest around them. Becca, I would be super curious to talk with you maybe afterwards about this particular acreage. It is to the east of Durango in an area, it's the New Taylor Ranch subdivision. We were approached by a person that owns 80 acres there. He had a number of trees on the ground that he wanted milled. He has an idea for a CLT project on his property, and he's asked a lot about additional thinning. It's our understanding that one of the Firewise organizations may have potentially thinned this area or thinned parts of it at some point in the past, and we can see some evidence of that. But the drone we've been using can help us with stand density, and actually has been able to pick out the difference between ponderosa pines, junipers, oaks, just on some height characteristics. You can kind of see a heat map where the ponderosas start to really jump out. And we think we've got a tool here that might be helpful in some very small scale kind of targeted thinning in the WUI, and would help us with a source of raw material as well. Just another photo of what that drone can do. We've been blown away with some of the point cloud resolution that we've been able to get out of the drone, where we can, with some of these oblique views, see clearly which are the ponderosa and which aren't, and help us make better decisions so we get into conversations with folks that might be doing some additional harvest. And lastly, Tim sort of started it, but Denver has been fantastic. You can see a big quote there on Denver. But just getting local code officials, local building departments to recognize mass timber. They may not have the international building codes up to date, especially in rural communities. And so we're finding that we have to do quite a bit of education. What is mass timber? What is CLT? What are its structural tolerances? Can it bear snow load? How does it perform in the wind? And for big metropolitan areas, Seattle, Portland, Denver, Salt Lake City, they have staff that are all up to speed and know exactly what they're working with. But as we're dealing with Durango, Bayfield, some of the other smaller communities up the West Slope, hopefully someday even Flagstaff, we're learning that sitting down with building and code officials early on and showing them some very early drawings of what a CLT building might look like, and give them some scholarly papers from around the country to help just educate is really key. So when it comes to being able to utilize the material, making sure that you've got the pathway paved all the way through, so that when you have a finished product, you can then put it in a building and put it to use is going to be a really important thing. And to that point, Tim mentioned kind of our business model. Right now we're Durango based. We're trying to really limit our working circle to sub 100 miles. We see that is where Ponderosa pine starts to pencil out from a raw material and cost standpoint, moving at fewer miles. We're also really concerned about the pounds of material we're moving across how many miles, so that we can start to get a look at embedded carbon in a particular building. So moving material smaller distances and keeping our working circle really small is important to us. So as we grow, our hope is to have what we're calling kind of micro manufacturing facilities. Say, you know, Pagosa Springs would be our first opportunity there, maybe a partnership with J.R. Ford and his biochar operation. But, you know, they're part of the same national forest. They've got abundant ponderosa pine, but given that it is 60 miles away, it would be ideal to have another small scale facility there. Our facility is just about 1,000 square feet, and we're seeing how much we can pack into that 1,000 square feet so that we could get a sense of, you know, if someone in another community wanted to stand up a similar type facility, we would be able to help them, whether it's through, you know, just training and or it's through sort of franchise model. We're putting that together and help a number of our communities. And those are the slides. That's Kyle there on the upper right. That's me sitting on a stack there in the bottom. But I'd love to just open it up to questions. I think this group is going to have some really awesome questions. Someone mentioned smaller trees. I'll just I'll back up a few slides here. I have spent an enormous amount of time trying to figure out what I can do with 8 and 9 inch DBH trees. I've been able to get my hands on about 50 trees of that size so far, and have got some good saw logs out of them. We start with an 11-foot long saw log, and really trying to figure out what our yields can be in a in an 8 or 9 inch DBH tree. And given the CLT standards and the ratio of thickness to width, we can get very usable boards out of trees that are that small. So our hope is, as folks are looking for saw logs for dimensional lumber, and they're being asked by the Forest Service to remove smaller diameter trees, that we can be an end user of those smaller diameter trees. So I'd love to get some questions if you all have some.
Thanks, Andy. That was great. I know you were sending some up to get, you were going to send some of your first panels to get tested, maybe up in Montana. Do you have some of that structural testing underway at this point?
We're just working that out with Oregon State and with SmartLam in Columbia Falls. And yeah, Becca, I think our next couple of panels we will saw up and send up that way to start glue line testing and start working on the structural testing. We had put together a 2020 Wood Innovation Grant application to help our local college, Fort Lewis College, develop some wood testing capacity. And we hit one little hurdle with that grant application, but we're undeterred. So we're actually going to reapply this coming January with a slight modification to the application so that we can hopefully help Fort Lewis develop the capacity to do some of the testing of wood products here in the Southwest. But yeah, Becca, we're on the verge of sending some of that stuff out.
Cool, thanks.
I got a couple of questions. One, are you, when you go to private landowners, are you guys doing the logging? Are you contracting the logging out and bringing your wood miser to the property, or are you hauling the logs to your property? That's the first question.
Yeah, awesome question. We have to this point been bringing the sawmill to the property. We're trying to do the sawing in the woods so that, you know, if the landowner wants chip, or if they need the biomass for some other reason, we can hopefully keep some of that material in the forest rather than bringing it back to our shop. To this point, we have been dealing with private landowners that already have logs on the ground and haven't started doing a lot of felling. There are a couple of very new and small operations in Durango that are starting to do some thinning, and we're cooperating with them. And then we've also reached out. Our local NRCS office has been incredible, and they might have 2 years worth of our utilization decked and on the ground. So to this point, no, we're not logging. We have not been felling. That wasn't the original mission of our company, but man, somebody sees a sawmill in the woods and they want to put trees on the ground. But no, we don't want to be loggers, not unless we have to.
And then, so you're using 5/4. I'm assuming you're then planing it down to 4/4 for your finish to get your 3 inches and stacking 3 boards. It's kind of what I was seeing. Is the width, do you guys have like, are you doing a uniformed width on those? Like everything's 1x6, or are you doing random widths, or is there a minimum width and a maximum width? I was kind of interested in that.
Yes, so exactly. Right now, we've focused on a 3 lamina panel with 4/4 finished boards, so that we end up with a 3-inch thick panel by the time it's glued up and pressed. We have been standardizing cant width down to 6-inch cants and 4-inch cants. There is a minimum ratio within PRG 320 as far as thickness to board width goes. There is a minimum width, and it's 2 3/4 would be our absolute minimum board width to meet the construction standard. We haven't gone to a board that thin yet, but there are minimums. There are not a maximum to my knowledge, but given that we're trying to utilize smaller saw logs, and just at a 5-foot by much wider than 6 inches, just sort of become unwieldy. 6 and less. And one of my goals actually with my next round of sawing is to get very specific with my cant width. I'm going to go down a 1/2 inch and try and work with 5.5-inch cants, because that's going to get us to a point where the boards in the panel are more uniform, and it just fits better in that 5-foot by 10-foot form factor.
Okay, last question I have, and I appreciate you letting me kind of ask a few questions here. On that panel, like, are there specifications of knots per board, or are you having to flip the knots or move, or how do you deal with the knots? Because that's been one of the things that I've been told is the problem with ponderosa pine and CLT, is that we just don't have we have too many knots.
So the standard is number 2 or better on the outside layers, and number 3 or better on the inside layers. I'm not a grader, although we've been thinking about that. Melissa and Tim have been also part of this conversation. We do need a few additional graders in Southwest Colorado. I've been talking to the Colorado Timber Industry Association and some folks about potential training. Whether we go to grading batches of wood by somebody else, we go mechanical grading, which is kind of a long shot, or we start to grade in-house. That is a conversation we're having between Kyle and I. But the CLT standard, that ANSI APA standard, is when it comes to knot and wane, the outside boards on CLT have to be number 2 or better, and the inside has to be number 3 or better. And we're coming across boards that will meet that standard, but yes, they are, they're on the edge of what is a number 2 and what is a number 3.
But Andy, that would be for to qualify structurally, and some of what you're doing and the way you're getting around that right now is by making your walls, the panels in between the timber frame. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. If it's going to be a certified panel that is in a load bearing capacity and it's serving as the shear wall, then it, it needs to pass those structural standards. If you are using post and beam and it's a timber frame and you're filling in the void with a CLT based wall system, then we can get away with boards that aren't meeting number 2 or number 3 because it becomes very aesthetic. But we're chasing that APA certification, so we're trying to build to that standard.
Hi, Andy. This is Han from Northern Arizona University. Can you go back to the slide that showing the board? Yeah, this one. So it's kind of a follow-up question on the nutty material with the just a pine species. Have you done anything to the? And I mean, kind of a follow-up question would be: have you done anything to do with address this kind of a nutty issue or lumbar defect issue with finger joint approach?
Han, that's an awesome question. We were a small company and we're young, and one of the things we actually backed away from in building the company was going to a full-scale kind of Pacific Northwest or Canadian model of manufacturing where they are using finger joiners to remove board defects and deal with knots. So we do not have a finger joiner. Because we are at this smaller form factor of 5 feet by 10 feet, we're just using unjoined boards. If we decided to go bigger than that, then yes, we'd have to be into a finger joiner. And I think, again, being focused on utilizing some of the smaller diameter saw logs. So no, we don't have a finger joiner. No, we're not cutting knots out yet. We're trying to find saw logs where we can get some number 2 boards and number 3 boards out of those saw logs.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have 2 more questions. Have you thought about the treating the wood with the heat to improve the fire resistance?
That's actually Tim and Melissa. When we did our public outreach with them last year, we had Hoover out. They did a really incredible presentation on fire treated wood products. And then we actually did a very cool kind of discussion around just the inherent fire performance around untreated CLT. So on a 3-hour burn through test, 3-inch thick CLT performs better than drywall and studs. Cool. So no, we have not fire treated the CLT. It's our understanding just from reading kind of industry literature that as it stands untreated, it will meet or exceed a 3-hour burn through test. So no, we're not utilizing fire treated boards in the production of these panels.
Great, thank you. My final question is that based on your CLT construction experience, what do you see as a benefits or advantage to go with CLT construction over the use of round wood? For example, I saw you build organ using the CLT, but here in Flagstaff, I also see the final part of the organ using small diameter round wood. So what would you say about the benefit with CLT construction?
It's one of the goals of our company. One of our mission measures is around cost of housing in our area and speeds of construction. Our community is definitely fighting the overall cost of housing, the cost of building. Building in Durango can run upwards of, it's bumping up against $300 a square foot or more to do construction in Durango, and that is pricing an enormous sector out of our region. So one of our hope, one of the measuring, how can we put buildings together with CLT? We believe in the really good case studies out there, even a case study out of DU the mass timber building that they just put together on campus at DU, is that one of the benefits to CLT being that it is factory built and can be shipped to site ready to assemble is that you can dramatically increase the speed of construction, therefore lowering overall labor input into the building on the job site. And we think, in an area where, just seasonal weather challenges are high too, being able to do a lot of the construction in an insulated and air, a conditioned shop versus out on the job site is key. The idea behind the Hogan, when a couple of folks from the Navajo Nation approached us, was, they would love to be able to have something, they said, that snapped together like Legos. And we were like, oh yeah, well, that's the comparison is often made. But, rather than just round logs, for that particular project, Han, something that goes together quickly, goes together with a limited number of trades, can go together with someone with limited experience in construction, and could be shipped to the job site on a flatbed truck. We think that hopefully that would help solve a few problems with some of the limited housing on the nation, and to it's a very solid wall, and it would provide a very durable building.
Great. Thank you so much. I like to say that I really appreciate your effort on the utilizing the ponderous pine to make a CLT. It's been a very, very strong interest of that idea here happening here in Arizona, and we're really looking forward to seeing some your successful stories. Making good progress on the making CLT out of the ponderous pine. I think that is going to be very, very interesting to a lot of folks out here in Arizona as well.
Yeah, thank you. We love it. It is a really fun raw material to work with. It's challenging, but there was a time in our building past where ponderosa pine, it was much more of what went into buildings, and then it stopped. And so we've got to work with its eccentricities. I think there's a lot to be unlocked in the drying process. Every time we cut boards or cants, we learn something new. And every time we either air dry it or kiln dry it, we're learning something new. And so, working around knots and then working around its mobility in the drying process is going to be really key. I just anecdotally at this point, I don't have empirical data yet. A couple years down the road, I will. But I think that drying in the cant form and then resawing is going to be one of the key learnings.
Hey, Neil Chapman here. A couple quick questions. If you already addressed this, I'm sorry. I had to sneak off in the middle there for just a moment. 5 foot by 10 foot section. What's the weight on that?
280 pounds.
280. And then what are you doing with your sawmill residuals? What are you guys? How are you getting rid of that stuff?
Right. Yeah. Biomass is everything. Yes. We get told that our waste will eat us for lunch on a regular basis. Our shop and the adjacent shop are actually heated they've got hydronic heating, and there's a boiler. Some of it we're feeding to the boiler to keep the shops warm. We have considered a pelletizer. We're not there yet, but it might be something we have to pursue. This will be news to Tim, but we've been talking to one of our local composting facilities. There's a group here in Durango that does a table to farm compost in reverse, really neat organization. And they now have fairly large composting piles. They've got tons of nitrogenous waste, but they actually needed some carbon. So when it comes to chip and dust from the planer, we're working on a plan to provide them with chip and dust because they need it for their compost piles. So we're getting creative, whether it's pelletizing, biochar, or working with composting. We're going to have to find a solution for it, because whether it's larger scale biomass and branches, things of that nature, or it's the small scale stuff from the shop in chip and dust, we know we've got to actually solve that problem before it becomes a problem.
Right on. Thank you. Yeah, the non-traditional ideas and solutions. You know, I often see that being so much more um, likely to solve so many of our problems than just the tradition. I mean, the traditional people aren't showing up to solve our problems. So I love all these
No.
things. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And again, we think that that is also one of the reasons to try and set up manufacturing in smaller, dispersed locations where you can deal with the waste in a smaller quantity, rather than say creating 2-3 tons a day of waste at a very large facility. If we can create a couple 100 pounds of waste a day, couple small cities, then we're not creating as large of a problem in one particular look. I think dealing with residuals and waste in the woods is, that's a problem we don't lose sight of. And then just dealing with residuals and waste, even as I'm edging boards on the mill, all of that has to find a use, and we're trying to get creative. So ideas are welcome.
I was thinking we should take all the recycled cardboard and make you an insulation with all the cardboard that comes into our area from Amazon and stuff now. Just since you can't do, we don't have the wood fiber.
We've talked about it, Beck,
Right, we'll work on that one.
figuring out how small of a hammer mill can we get, and can we actually make cellulistic insulation to put in our own panels. It's over a cup of coffee. We've talked about it.
Good, I'm glad I wasn't too far off base. Well, it's almost 11:30.
You are not, no, you are not off base at all.
Any final questions for Andy? Because I think we're about at time here, but somebody might just have a burning question.
I don't have a burning question, but I just wanted to, I do architectural history as well, and living in Flagstaff, our lumber industry was built on ponderosa pine, and so many of our wonderful old homes that were built in the late 1800s and early 1900s are from our local pine. So echoing what you're saying, there's this, I'm learning about the wood utilization industry and stuff more and more, because I've been like, why not? They built it. We still have these bungalows that are standing, but this is really cool. This is really cool, because I'm learning actually through Dr. Hahn and through Damon, my conversations with them, how the perception of ponderosa pine has been, and that it's just not great. So this is awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and there are ponderosa pine built buildings in the Durango area too, and when Kyle's idea behind Timber Age hatched in 2016, he was working on a wood innovation grant for a different application over at the Western Excelsior Mill. But the Forest Service kept saying, Kyle, can you think about what might be done with ponderosa pine and smaller diameter ponderosa pine, things that we know we need to get out of the forest, and it's going to be in fairly large quantities. And that's really what drove us, was that there is a really cool history of the use of ponderosa pine in building. But given that we're dealing with primarily regrowth from prior logging, let's just change the form, right? Maybe it doesn't produce fantastic dimensional lumber. However, CLT is a neat workaround to some of that, is that you get to glue slightly lower quality, smaller boards together into a serious monolith, and it might be a great way to bring ponderosa pine back into utilization.
Cool. Thank you so much, Andy. That was awesome. I am recording, so hopefully that recording from today goes through and I can post that and share that for people to look back at, or for other people who weren't able to join today. I believe our next call, with hopefully featuring Damon and some other uses and ways to use ponderosa pine, will be September 24th. Is that what we figured, Ann?
Yeah. September 24th, 10:30 to 11:30 Mountain Time, 9:30 Arizona. And Damon, I'll get a hold of you and we'll work out details for that.
Great. And we'll post that stuff.
And Becca,
Yeah.
if you guys would like them, I'm more than happy to send you these slides. I'll see if I can compress it into something emailable, and happy to give it to your network.
Okay.
And
Andy,
there's so many
probably-
people on this call I want to talk to again.
You could probably, if you just post straight to that Podio space too, you're in there now, so you can drop that and you guys can ask each other questions directly in there. That's the great thing about that space. You don't have to wait to be on a call together, or you all can connect with each other already through that system. So, and if you're not on there, drop something in the chat, or shoot me an email, and we'll make sure that you can use that space. So,
Yeah, and
I will do that. Yeah.
And I could add.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, thank you. I would just add too, if anybody has trouble with Podio, Becca and I are happy to help you. So get a hold of us and we can walk you through it.
And I'll keep the chat open for just a second in case any of you aren't in there and want to be. But thank you all for joining today. Oh, I see I missed Eli on that Eli was here. Cool.
Yeah, I noticed, but it was like getting sort of late, and also Molly Pitts was on there.
Oh, good.
I tried to get everybody.
Yeah,
but
hey
we'll
guys,
see.
I'm here.
Hey,
Who is
Sorry,
that? Eli?
this is Eli.
There you are.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm in the field teaching force measurements, so I was just listening today.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. Yeah, you came in just sort of at the end and I saw your name, but Becca was moving on. I thought I won't say anything. And then I also noticed that Molly Pitts was on as well. So but I did record them as being on. So
Yeah, it was great. It was a great. As soon as I can.
cool.
awesome. Go through Podio and tag him. You just put @ and his name, which is, what is it again, Becca, his last name?
Andrew Hawk, like the bird.
Hawk.
Yep.
So you put @ and then Andrew Hawk, and it will even tag him in Podio, Eli. And if you need any help with that, just let me know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I don't see
Yeah,
anything
thank you.
else in the chat, so I'm going to close out the call, Ann.
Okay, Becca, great job. Have a great day. I got to run to another
All right.
meeting.
Take care.